He's forging peace as we speak, one country and one region after the other. Those are the words of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he presented the US President Donald Trump with a letter that he says he sent nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump replying that he thinks things are going to be really settled down a lot in the Middle East. The highlights then as the two men met for dinner in the White House. Netanyahu saying he's working on plans to give Palestinians a better future and even suggesting that the residents of Gaza should be allowed to move to differing nations.
I think President Trump had a brilliant vision. It's called free choice. You know, if people want to stay, they can stay. But if they want to leave, they should be able to leave. It shouldn't be a prison. It should be an open place and give people a free choice. We're working with the United States very closely about finding countries that will seek to realize what they always say, that they want to give the Palestinians a better future.
And we've had great cooperation from surrounding Israel, surrounding countries, great cooperation from every single one of them. So something good will happen.
Well, international affairs commentator Doug Herbert is joining me here on set. Doug, we're going to talk about that dinner in just a moment, but perhaps events in Israel even more significant. Israel's defense minister laying out plans for the forced transfer of Gazans to what he called a secured city built on the ruins of Gaza. Already legal experts describing it as a blueprint for a crime against humanity, Doug.
So yes, Stuart, if I were to stand here and say to you that these plans are essentially plans to build a concentration camp in occupied territory in the southern tip of Gaza, you might be a little shocked. You might roll your eyes. Some of our viewers might say, come on, that's a bunch of hyperbole. What's he talking about? Not my words. The Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, has explicitly used the word concentration, saying that these plans call for concentrating hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions, of Gazans in Rafah. Remember, Rafah is right abutting Egypt there at the very southern tip of Gaza. It's been all but razed in this war. Now, you see an arrow up there on the screen. What this is it's summing up plans by the Israeli defense minister, Israel Katz, who has basically instructed the Israeli Defense Forces to bring forward a plan to transfer in a first phase up to 600,000 Palestinians. Here's the arrow part, right? Al-Mawasi is a coastal area. You can see it right there on the Mediterranean, in which hundreds of thousands already displaced Palestinians have been crammed in, evacuated there from other areas. They would, under this plan, be coming in an initial phase from Al-Mawasi, transferred to Rafah. Now, here's where there are a split screen of what the Israelis, how they build this plan, and what legal experts, what international rights groups looking at the details of this plan, as so far proposed, are saying. The Israelis say this is merely a plan to get all the Gazans in one place. They're calling it a humanitarian zone. Israel's defense minister calls it, quote, a humanitarian city. The caveat being it's built on the ruins of a razed city of Rafah. The other caveat being is it's a small city. Cramming in 600,000 Gazans, let alone ultimately the entire population of Gaza, over 2 million people, that would be, to put it mildly, extremely cramped conditions there. What the legal experts say is it looks like, and it's not a far-fetched to speculate this because the Israeli right-wing government of Netanyahu has explicitly talked about this type of vision. It looks like the prelude to a mass deportation, if you will, of the Palestinians concentrated in this zone in Rafah out of Gaza, out of the Gaza Strip, to other neighboring countries willing to take them. We talked at the meeting, Donald Trump, Netanyahu, and Trump talked about a brighter future. You quoted Netanyahu saying that for Palestinians. That's how he sees it. The Israelis are not billing this as a forcible transfer, a forcible deportation. You said at the top that would be under international treaties seen as a crime, a war crime, a crime against humanity, forcibly uprooting an entire population from their homeland and shipping them out of their country. What he sees this as is basically something that would offer them a better future, a brighter future. But at the end of the day, this is a plan that looks like and seems like, when you look at its details, something that is going to very much be something that raises a lot of hackles with Palestinians who are going to be wondering what's going on here. We're perfectly fine where we already live in other parts of Gaza. This looks like the prelude to a plan to evacuate all of Gaza, create an Israeli-controlled, militarily controlled site in that strip, and then get the Palestinians out. So perhaps you could ultimately build Donald Trump's vision of a Riviera of the Mideast in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, Doug, the way that the more interesting story it seemed to happen in Israel, whereas we were left at the dinner with very little to say, really. There wasn't much substance. I mean, any closer to a ceasefire in Gaza?
Look, closer to a ceasefire could happen, right? Donald Trump clearly has made it clear that he thinks they're close to a deal. He thinks Hamas is perhaps ready to negotiate. He's been ramping up the pressure on Netanyahu. Donald Trump says he wants an end to the war. The question is, Netanyahu says he wants the war to end. He wants the hostages to end. But Netanyahu puts very strict conditions on that. He says that the changes to the proposed plan, the U.S. brokered plan that Hamas has proposed changes to, are just not acceptable to Israel. So the problem is, yeah, you can end up with a ceasefire agreement. We could be standing here in a few days, a week's time, 2 weeks' time saying ceasefire deal. The problem is a lasting peace, a lasting ceasefire. We saw what happened during the last one earlier this year, 42-day ceasefire, which collapsed. It was supposed to be in 3 phases. It collapsed before it even got past the first phase. Why? Because there are strict differences, demarcations between Netanyahu's insistence on vanquishing Hamas. That is an insistence from his far right members of his coalition who do not want an end to this war until Hamas is out of there, decimated, no longer exists. And the Hamas is insistent that any ceasefire must include guarantees for a lasting ceasefire, an end to the war, and the full withdrawal of Israeli troops. The Israelis have committed themselves under the proposed plan to withdrawing from parts of Gaza, some parts of Gaza, not all of them, very differing visions of the plan. Netanyahu could accept a deal, but it won't be the deal that the Palestinians or Hamas specifically sees as what they agree to.
And Doug, just time to ask you, I know you wanted to talk about the West Bank as well, home to some 700,000 Jewish settlers. And the government of Netanyahu, you say, continuing its policy of land grabs there very much.
Two distinct things happening here. Absolutely. As you know, Israel occupied Gaza after the Six-Day War in 1967. It has maintained that zone as an occupied zone. It is since then every government has had settlements there, and there's been a recent surge in the expansion of those settlements. Last month, 2 months ago actually now, in May, the Israeli government approved 22 new settlements, that is Jewish settlements, Jewish settlers putting up posts and living among the Palestinian population in West Bank, and also authorized new outposts. These outposts, these illegal, are considered illegal under international law. They're not recognized by the international community. Those settlements are expanding. On Monday, we had more of what the Palestinians see as a land grab, Israelis called state lands, a land grab in northeastern Ramallah, which is the administrative capital of Gaza, which they are going to attach the Israelis to one of these Jewish settlements. And finally, you have the demolition policy, which is separate. That is a policy of raising homes in a lot of the Palestinian refugee camps, Tulkarem, Jenin, Nur Shams. The Israelis say in order to create a more controlled security zone to prevent terrorist breeding grounds from springing up there. The Palestinians say, no, it's basically expelling people, displacing people from their homes, and making the prospect of a viable Palestinian state even less likely. So the combination of that, the home demolitions, and plus the settlement expansion and explicit policy of Netanyahu's government do make that two-state solution or a viable state seem far off as ever.